on.
It's rape.
She's my girlfriend. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Go home, take a taxi, yeah?
Well, go on then.
What's happening?
She just want to go home.
I'll go then.
No, I need to know what's going on. There's clearly a disturbance there. What's going on?
Okay, it doesn't matter, thank you.
After the call, which lasted several minutes, the handler established she was speaking to this man. The police did investigate, but took no further action against Minoy, describing his victim as drunk and abusive. But 6 years later, this assault was played out in court as part of Operation Sanctuary, a police investigation finally lifting the lid on the actions of a grooming gang. It exposed how over many years a group of Asian men from the West End of Newcastle had been abusing vulnerable young women and girls. Throughout much of this programme, we're reconstructing real-life events. Sarah was 19, extremely vulnerable and unable to look after herself. Along with other at-risk teenagers, she was regularly abused by older men. These are Sarah's words, spoken by an actor.
They just sit there and have a couple of drinks. Have a couple of puffs of cannabis, get up and dance, and they try and get into the bedroom by grabbing us like around the belly. And when you do that against the door, no! They still try and drag you though to the bedroom. Basically they think that, like with them having a load of money and they're married and they've got kids and all that they can go for younger, like our age, and have sex with them for like 40 quid or tenner or something like that.
In the new year of 2014, Sarah told the police she'd been raped by Abdul Minoy, the same man heard arguing on the 999 call 3 years earlier.
Ever since I've kept to myself. I haven't told my dad, my family members. I couldn't bring myself to tell anyone because I felt ashamed, embarrassed. And people were going, have you ever been raped? Well, I bloody have. Now I'm telling you, it's proper horrible. I need somewhere to go, to be safe.
A police officer took Sarah on a tour of the West End to try to identify Minoy's house and car and other places where what she described as parties had taken place. Sarah's information was a red flag. The abuse was on a much bigger scale.
I think it would have set just about every alarm bell ringing that it was possible to sound.
Andrew Norfolk is credited by many for breaking what's described as a conspiracy of silence over the issue of Asian grooming gangs. At the time detectives in Newcastle were hearing Sarah's story, the authorities in South Yorkshire were under fire for failing to protect hundreds of victims of a grooming gang in Rotherham.
I find it almost inconceivable that when the Rotherham scandal finally erupted, there were not a great many police forces and local authorities across England sitting there and thinking, there but for the grace of God. How does anybody know that what was going on in Rotherham for all those years wasn't happening in another part of the country?
And it wasn't just Rotherham. Patterns were emerging of similar grooming gangs across England. Here, the detective in charge of Sarah's case told his bosses that what she'd said signalled something much bigger. Days later, the officer's hunch was given added weight when 2 girls in care reported they'd been repeatedly raped by a group of older Asian men. The girls were aged 14 and 15. The girls described being driven into Newcastle, where they were plied with alcohol and cocaine before being raped and beaten by several men. They were then given money and taken back to where they were in care. So, a team from Northumbria Police began a massive intelligence gathering exercise.
Within Operation Sanctuary, we're dealing
This
with...
is the moment when Operation Sanctuary began.
We were dealing with offences of grooming, rape, supply of drugs and human trafficking. There's some cultural considerations there which we must be mindful of.
And over the following weeks across the West End of Newcastle, police! Police! They carried out a series of raids.
Get over that dog.
You're arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to commit rape.
What? Do you want to put your hands in front of you, please?
It'll all be explained to you when you get to the police station.
Conspiracy to commit rape, Sinicky? Keep it to yourself, right, bud?
Inside the flats, the police discovered evidence of partying.
And any maybe lasses' names are out there.
Come on, phones, laptops, SIM cards.
They seized mobiles, computers and drugs, anything which would help piece together their investigation. And at the beginning of 2014, they went public with the inquiry.
15 arrests as police investigate claims of sexual abuse of young women in Newcastle.
Some of them were in local authority care.
This could be somebody who you see in circumstances that just doesn't feel right. You see them associating with older boys or indeed with older men.
There can't be any political correctness or any sensitivities. They are criminals that have committed some of the worst crimes in our society, and we need to deal with them with the full letter of the law.
If it looks wrong and it feels wrong, then please get in touch with us.
Police officers took to the streets on a publicity drive. Taxi drivers and late-night takeaways were targeted. The publicity brought results. 2 teenagers walked into Biker police station. They told a familiar story of how they'd also been abused over several years. The girls explained how they'd been sitting on a bench in the early hours of the morning in Benwell. They were wearing only pyjamas and were picked up by Mohammed Azram, known as Azzy G. He offered to let them warm up in his car. The girls, then aged just 16, were taken away, fed drugs and alcohol, and then one of them had sex with Azram. The story is familiar. At first, the girls believe they're in a relationship, but then as time goes on, the controlling becomes much more explicit. They're plied with drink and drugs, upon which they become increasingly dependent. They're sexually assaulted and shared around amongst the other men. So, with the abusers in a tightly knit group and their victims often traumatized, the police investigation was fraught with difficulty. Perhaps that's why they took a highly controversial decision: to recruit a man with a shocking past, and it could have derailed the entire inquiry.
A chiz is what most people would know is called an informant or a snout, a grass.
Informants operate in a shadowy world that seldom comes to public attention. Neil Woods has a unique insight. It was his job to handle informants in the Midlands.
CHIS stands for Covert Human Intelligence Source. It's the person who a lot of the time has a criminal background and provides information to police officers about other criminal activities.
The man chosen by Northumbria Police was a convicted child rapist. XY, as he became known, was jailed for 7 years for attacking a 15-year-old girl. He'd picked her up off the street in 2001, plied her with drink and drugs, and gang raped her with 2 of his friends. Despite being a high-risk sex offender, the police decided to bring XY on board. He was already on their books, having worked for them for several years as an informant. His task? To act as their man on the inside. We can't name XY for legal reasons, but he knew many in the grooming gang. This, in his own words, spoken by an actor, is why the police brought him into the inquiry.
I was told this is an operation about Asian grooming gang. This is what we are after. These are the people we are interested in. I had to find out what's going on, where the party is taking place. Last party I went, 1 or 2, I found out about parties. So when they were happening, I would bring it in.
Between March 2014 and December 2015, XY was paid £10,300 for the information he supplied to his police handler. But that wasn't his only reward.
There are a variety of motivations for chizzers. Most of the time, it's for financial benefit. Sometimes they are providing information because they hope that information will mean that they will get a discount on their prison sentence if they are on bail for something.
During his time as an informant, XY benefited from lighter sentences, and he was certainly a prolific offender. In all, XY had 53 convictions. He had a history of fraud and assaults. While working for Operation Sanctuary, he was arrested for dishonesty, an assault in a mosque, and he was even questioned about making sexual advances to a 13-year-old girl.
I think it's absolutely disgusting. I don't think any police force should be working with paedophiles.
Sammy Woodhouse was just 14 when she was abused by a grooming gang in Rotherham.
He came to me as my Prince Charming and then later on turned into a monster.
She now advises police forces on how to tackle grooming. We showed her our information on XY.
I think it's an absolute kick in teeth. It's just so insulting. They clearly thought that no one was going to know about it and they thought they'd get away with it.
How would you describe the behaviour of Northumbria Police in using a convicted sex offender like this?
It's absolutely shameful and I think they should be ashamed of themselves. And I think they need to ask the question is, how would I feel if this was my daughter? I mean, as a victim, I don't think I'd go to that police force after hearing information like this. And if this kind of stuff can shock me, it's going to shock anybody. And I don't think the public's going to be happy whatsoever when this gets out.
I can completely understand the public's outrage. The outrage that a convicted child rapist is going to be paid money. But there's no room to be squeamish in this world. If you want to investigate child sexual offences, you've got to use every tool at your disposal.
We'll probably never know the exact reason why the police used XY. What we do know is that their secret strategy could have wrecked the whole operation, as we'll see later. By the summer of 2015, the police were ready to bring their case to court. But with more than 20 defendants, the trials were divided up into 4. In the first, 8 men were in the dock. The verdicts: Saiful Islam, 10 years for rape. Mohammed Hassan Ali, 7 years for sexual activity with and supplying drugs to a child. Mohammed Azram, Nashir Uddin, Jahangir Zaman, all convicted of sexual assault, drugs offences and inciting women into prostitution. Yasser Hussain got 2 years for assault and witness intimidation. 2 others were acquitted. But the next cases didn't run so smoothly. In March 2016, it emerged that XY, the child rapist informant, had fallen out with his police handler and was now threatening to go to the press. XY had in effect gone rogue and was making highly damaging claims about the investigation. we've obtained a secret transcript of XY's interview with the National Crime Agency, which was called in to investigate his allegations. Much of it is so sensitive that it's been blacked out, but in the extracts we can read, XY claims the police operation was racist, that he was tasked by his handler to plant drugs at the homes of the grooming gang, and he was even told to take vulnerable girls to parties.
He asked me at one point, go pick one up and bring it to the house and bring some drug with you. So I go, pick these lasses, taking them to the party and leave some drug on the table.
The claims caused an outcry in the courtroom. The prosecution wanted the whole issue debated in secret, but the BBC challenged that, which is why we can now tell you the full story. Defence lawyers argued that XY's claims so discredited the police case it was fatally flawed and the trial should be abandoned. Years of investigation and a multi-million-pound inquiry were in jeopardy.
The prosecution has expressed incredulity at our complaint about the deployment of XY, a convicted child rapist who drugged a child and then contacted someone else to rape her after he had.
This is a case where a rapist was put into the field where he would be with vulnerable young women when intoxicated. There have been some 30 occasions when it was disclosed by XY that he had been to parties. The police were happy for him to be going to parties, taking drugs, being out of control because of the high value of the information. This is an affront to the public conscience.
He had committed a series of frauds. He was arrested for assaulting someone in a mosque. He attempted to incite a female in July 2015. He was arrested for breaching the sex offenders register. If the public were told this, would they have confidence in the administration of justice? It is not difficult to predict what the answer would be.
Eventually, the judge insisted XY should be brought to court. By now, he and his family had been moved out of the area and were under round-the-clock police protection. He gave his evidence from behind a screen and blamed his many inconsistencies on the pressure of working as a police informant.
You have to remember that I've been through a lot. It's impossible to remember what's true, what's not. You put me through this. If I get shot or died, it would have been easier for my wife. Then she could keep the kids.
Yeah, man, we know who you are, you
At one stage, there was an angry confrontation involving the men in the dock. Men who previously saw XY as a friend, but now discovered he was paid to spy on them. In the end, the judge threw out the defence's attempt to halt the trials and dismissed all of XY's allegations. She said he was wholly unworthy of belief and rejected his evidence entirely. The police say their watchdog, the IPCC, has cleared them of any wrongdoing. The judge, though, said it wasn't her job to rule on the police decision to employ XY.
In effect, I am being asked to substitute my judgment about the kind of person who should be used as an informant for the judgment of the officers whose work this is. That I decline to do.
Others, though, are not so restrained.
Personally, I can't envisage circumstances where I would have authorised payment to someone convicted of rape.
Jim Gamble is the former policeman who set up the government's task force to fight child sexual exploitation.
When you're desperate for intelligence, I can see why there may have been an appetite for it. I can't imagine how you could have control mechanisms in place with an informant of that type that you were going to task that would give you reassurance that they still didn't represent a risk to young and vulnerable women, given what I know about this particular person's history.
I think all police forces are under pressure to get things right, but there's ways and means of doing it. In my opinion, they've gone way over the line on this one. I certainly wouldn't like to think that somebody's out there paying my abuser to get that kind of information.
Would I be encouraging police forces across the country to go out and find a registered sex offender who'd been convicted of a sexual assault against a teenage girl, to task and use them to infiltrate other groups? And the answer to that is no.
This is the murky world in which we have to operate. We have to work in the shadows.
This is the man with ultimate responsibility for taking on XY.
We have to deal with people who themselves, sometimes, not always, are guilty, have been convicted of some of the most vile offences imaginable. We have to consider whether we would pay murderers for information. Would we pay rapists, drug dealers, burglars? And quite often these people can't be trusted. But the prize, the potential prize in doing that, is that you just might get a piece of information that leads you to a successful conviction, and you put bad people behind bars.
But what message does it send to a rape victim that you might be paying?
I think it sends a message that we will do everything we can to make sure that other women and girls are not victim of the same type of atrocity that they have been. That's our commitment.
In principle, then, sounds like you're saying you would use a convicted sex offender again in the future?
Yes, 100%, all day and all night. And if I'm presented with the same problem tomorrow, I'll do exactly the same thing again. Because if I'm going to be able to protect somebody, and in that individual case, I am content that we have not only brought dangerous men to justice and put them behind bars, in some cases, we have actually saved lives on the back of information that we have gained. Now, am I going to take that risk again? You're damn right I'm going to. It's inside the law. It's inside accepted policy and practice. I get that people might be quite shocked by it, but actually, this is the right thing to do.
In the 3 years since it started, Operation Sanctuary has led to a series of spin-off operations covering human trafficking, modern-day slavery, drugs and firearms offences. Northumbria Police say this has resulted in 97 convictions, with sentences totalling more than 300 years. But this week, the 4 grooming trials came to an end, bringing to 18 the number of people convicted on charges ranging from rape to conspiracy to incite prostitution. Others, like Nadeem Aslam, were convicted of supplying drugs but cleared of sex charges. Some of the offenders have already been given long jail sentences. The rest will be sentenced in September.
I'm absolutely satisfied, however difficult it's been. I look at the results that we've achieved. There's some vile individuals sat in prison today because of the dedicated work that officers in Northumbria Police have done to encourage victims and complainants to have the courage to come forward. So have I got any regrets about that? None, zero.
So Operation Sanctuary raises many important questions. As in dozens of similar cases across England, why were the abusers exclusively Asian men?
Here was a crime pattern that had existed for at least 2 decades. And from the very first day, we ran our very first article, which was in January 2011, saying, here is a conspiracy of silence in acknowledging this. Why are you not acknowledging that this pattern exists? From that day one, we said, what is absolutely crucially needed is research to understand why this pattern has put down such deep roots. That research is still not being carried out.
Why is it that there appears to be a predominance of this offending in a particular community? I think that community has to be asked that question. I think we can take part in that debate, but it's not led by the police. That's a job for society itself.
And then there's the issue of whether Northumbria Police missed chances to intervene years earlier and save vulnerable girls from abuse. We know the police were aware of numerous contacts between victims and their abusers almost 4 years before Operation Sanctuary. There was the 13-year-old girl in care in Northumberland who told police she'd been raped after being held against her will by an Asian man in Newcastle. No action was taken at the time. 2 teenage girls were found by the police in a car on a patch of wasteland in Newcastle with older men. They were drinking and smoking cannabis. The officers simply returned the girls to their parents and took no further action. A known sex offender called Abdul Sabeh was spotted with the same girls by a probation officer later in the year. The police were told, and they went to his flat in Walker. The girls were drunk, but again, the police took no action other than taking the girls home, and Sabeh was back in touch with them soon afterwards. In 2012, Bahmani Ahmadi was accused of rape by a 14-year-old girl from a Newcastle children's home. He was interviewed by the police, but no action was taken. Ahmadi continued to offend and was arrested again in 2014. He admitted a string of sexual assaults and jailed for 6.5 years.
Police emergency.
And finally, the case where the woman was heard shouting for help on a 999 call.
It's rape! Do you want to go home? I'll let you go.
It took 6 years to bring Abdul Minoyi to justice, by which time he'd raped another vulnerable young woman.
We're not perfect. We encountered one individual officer who should have been far more diligent and should have done their job better. And there were some serious failings in how they'd handled what was evidence in relation to one offender. That offender is behind bars and has been in prison for a lengthy period of time. The officer, we sacked them. And I would hope that would give some reassurance that in the course of this we've been absolutely resolute to make sure that the culture of Northumbria Police now is very, very different to that which it was many years ago.
We understand Newcastle City Council has launched a serious case review to examine why vulnerable teenagers in its care were not better protected. The men responsible for ruining so many young lives are facing long sentences. For the police, it can't yet be case closed. Whilst the difficulty of investigating grooming cases can't be underestimated, many are left wondering if it can ever be right to pay a child rapist thousands of pounds from the public purse. Inside Out is back with a brand new series starting Monday, September the 4th on BBC One.